All right, hello and welcome to this complimentary training with Patrick Gallagher from GridPane. I'm Chris from LifterLMS, and I just want to welcome you to this call. We're going to be getting into web hosting, and the title of this has to do with demystifying WordPress hosting specifically for LMS or learning management websites, online courses, training-based membership sites, company internal training portals, whatever you want to call it. These types of websites built with WordPress have really specific needs. And I want to get Patrick on here to facilitate this training. Number one, because he's a web hosting expert. I'm not. And he also has a talent of communicating and teaching about it in a way that a hosting DevOps engineer can understand what he's talking about. That's one of my frustrations with the web hosting industry is, and I'm sure, I mean, you might use a few technical terms, but when people start getting into things like PHP workers, CPU usage, and like, I know these things are important and I see them on the pricing table. Some things are unlimited and then there's like a little asterisk. All I'm saying is that it's an industry where there's like this divide. It's like talking to a lawyer or an accountant or something like that, where you just feel like you need to get this thing, but like you don't really understand the details of it. And every time I've talked to you, I'm like a little more enlightened about web hosting. And Patrick is an innovator in the space. He's innovating in a way and not just like building what's already out there with other companies and stuff like that. So there is no one size fits all web hosting companies. There's a lot of great web hosts in the space, but they're different. And in order to like see which one's the best fit for you, it's important to know like what are the right questions or things to look for. But Patrick's over from GridPane. So GridPane, I got it up here on my screen, which isn't live here, but Patrick says that GridPane is the world's first hosting control panel built exclusively for serious WordPress professionals. So we're going to get into what all this means and especially making it relevant for the modern LMS membership site creator. Patrick, thanks for coming on the stage to do this training today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man. Yeah, hopefully I won't get too technical. And obviously, if there's anything that you think will add value, if you need me to go down any particular rabbit hole or any tangent that you think will be useful for your people, feel free to totally interrupt. I'm going to try and make this as useful as possible, no matter where you end up hosting. But obviously, I'm going to talk about some things that GridPane does uniquely that I think is advantageous in the LMS space. Yep. And so what I figured we should do first is actually just talk about what web hosting is.
Well, before we jump in, let me just do a few housekeeping items.
Yeah.
Like Patrick is saying, this is interactive, so ask questions as we go in the chat or use the Q&A box. We will do a big Q&A at the end. Are you, Patrick, the type of presenter who prefers to save all questions to the end or take some as you go? And
honestly, I think if it makes sense, definitely let's pop some in the middle. Okay. Like I don't want people to lose the thread if we're focused in on a particular topic and it would be useful to add additional context, then absolutely. Totally. Whatever works for you guys.
Totally. So just let us know, and I can kind of MC the chat, and I'll jump in if somebody's like getting into something right where you are. Okay. And even if you have a question now that without seeing the presentation, it's not too early to drop it in there. There's like 3 areas that I find in this community where people have lots of opinions, lots of questions, and it's like hosting, CRMs, and themes, and page builder. So there's 4. So people have a lot of questions. So this is an opportunity with a true hosting expert, not just web hosting in general, but specifically for WordPress. So I'm super excited to get into it with you. And if you stay to the end, we are going to be doing our $99 giveaway of a LifterLMS add-on. So stick around to the end. If you're already a customer and you win, we're going to hook you up. If you want to apply that value to something bigger, we're going to do that as well. So we'll announce that at the end. And yeah, over to you, man. What is web hosting?
Okay. So yeah, we have some goodies that we're going to give away at the end as well. So so hang around. So yeah, so this might be beneath some of you. Like technically, you might already know exactly what web hosting is, but it's surprising to me how many customers of ours that we have that still didn't quite understand all of it. So I figure it's best to just start at the most basic level and just break down exactly what this stuff is in the simplest terms. And so really all web hosting, no matter whether you're at the lowest cost, 99 cents a month shared hosting, all the way up to the tip of the spear, $20,000 a month. Web hosting is really just three things. It's hardware, it's software, and it's support for when things inevitably break, because they always do. And so the hardware, that's just dedicated servers. Like you can picture, large data center rooms with, racks and racks and racks of computers the size of fridges with all the flashing lights. All of those are running specialized software called the stack, which just keeps the box running efficiently, makes it run fast. And then there's support for, how do all these things work together? Okay. And so specific to
Hey, Patrick, just real quick. There's like 3 of you in here. Is your laptop in here? Is there somebody else?
Oh, you know what?
There's a little bit of background noise coming from one of those, and I'm not sure.
I wonder if I shared the wrong link. I wonder if I shared the invite link.
Potentially. I think that person just jumped out. Not a big deal. I was just trying to figure out what was going on there.
Yeah, can you message me the correct link, and I'll actually take those down real quick.
Yeah, no problem. Kathy, if you don't mind grabbing that, I don't have that up right now.
Yeah, share the public link, and I just thought that I was looking at my regular Lifter account invite, and clearly I just shared the administrator.
The panel invite.
Yeah, the panel link.
Yeah,
so
it's all good.
Apologies.
And there's a second Patrick Gallagher in here right now. Do you have 2 in or just 1?
No, that's going to be another.
I'm gonna bump. There's some more coming in. I'm just gonna bump you all out. Patrick's gonna send a different link. If you came in through Patrick's link, he's gonna send a different link to rejoin. So I'm just gonna bump you out. Actually, I might be able to. I'm gonna just change you to attendee. So I can do that without bumping you out. There we go.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem.
I saw that popping up. I'm like, huh. Oh yeah, I definitely did that wrong. Okay, so yeah, once we have the right link, I'll share it back to the page.
Patrick, that's in the chat.
Okay. Let's see. Just 1 second.
Yeah, while you're just doing that, I'll just lay down some cover. When I talk to people and they give me their opinion about what's the best web hosting, support comes up a lot. I hear a lot about that, and but the hardware and the software, I think that's where a lot of the most confusion is, especially if you're not like a hosting expert.
Yeah, well, and the thing is that you made a point specifically about like workers,
PHP workers.
Yeah, PHP workers and all that stuff.
I have no idea what that is. I literally.
Yeah, so really, that's on purpose. They're doing that on purpose to basically make it somewhat more confusing, so you don't know exactly what it is that you're getting. So they're sort of abstracting away hardware in a way that makes it a little bit easier for them to charge more for it. Okay, and so I can drill down on some specific examples of that. But so I think it's worthwhile to talk before we actually sort of get into what's sort of essential in learning management system hosting specifically. I think it's useful to look at sort of the broader managed WordPress, because I think a lot of your customers are probably going to operate in that space. And so there are these sort of unified things, what I call the 5 pillars of managed WordPress, that pretty much every single person, every single major player out there has. Okay.
Would you just before you get into that, just I know it's a question in the audience. What's the difference between like regular hosting and then managed WordPress as a category?
Yeah, so unfortunately, sometimes nothing. Sometimes it's all just marketing. Okay.
Okay.
And the way that I view it, and I have another slide here to talk about it. There's unfortunately a whole bunch of what I would call fake managed, or air quotes managed WordPress,
Okay.
where it's really not the high degree of support and sort of onboarding and professional engineering that goes behind like the really high-end systems. Like in my opinion, there's only a small handful of true managed hosts. And then there's a whole bunch of people who are sort of pseudo-managed. And that's sort of where we fall. And I'll try to help sort of delineate those things so that people know why it is that maybe they're paying extra or why it's worthwhile to pay extra. And then they also can hopefully make better decisions about, you know, maybe they're not actually at a managed host even though they thought they were.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll get to that. And okay, so the 5 pillars that you'll find everywhere, you've got backups, pretty straightforward, you know, once a day, 3 times a day, every hour, they back stuff up, they make that stuff available to you. Updates. This is not only the servers themselves, the hardware side itself, but they update your core, they update your themes, they update your plugins, they make sure that your WordPress site is rocking and up to date. Security, which is a big one. They make sure that the site and the server itself are hardened. If you get hacked, most of them include some kind of remediation of that. You know, they scan for malware. They take care of everything in that regard. Then it's pretty much speed or performance, which is really just caching. Which caching is just sort of some software trickery that just delivers your site much faster. Generally speaking, when you go from sort of a shared hosting environment that's not specific to WordPress to a managed WordPress environment, even a fake managed WordPress environment, you'll notice a significant speed improvement, and it's almost always because of this caching layer. And then last, but certainly not least, is staging. You have a staging environment. It's like a practice playground area where you can make changes to your theme, you can make changes to your plugins, you can horse around and not risk damaging your live site, okay? So these are sort of table stakes, in my opinion. You have to have these things. If you're talking to a host and they're talking about how amazing it is that they have these, everybody in the managed space has these, okay? This is what you gotta have. This is minimum table stakes. So yeah, sort of the big lie in managed WordPress is, again, this idea that to my definition, true managed WordPress is a situation in which they're independently monitoring that your site is up and running at all times. Ideally, they're onboarding each site one at a time, okay? Meaning they're actually looking to see what are the specifications that your site actually needs. Is the platform optimized and tweaked in a specific way that best benefits what it is that you want? And if your site goes down, you don't have to tell them that it went down because they're actively monitoring it, okay? And so one of the ways that you can find out whether or not you're at a true managed host or at a host that's just saying that they're managed is if you intentionally break your site and then you just wait and see what happens. Spoiler alert, nothing happens. If you're at a non-managed host, they're not actively managing anything, okay? And so now there's nothing wrong with sort of self-managed. There's nothing wrong with things being fully automated by software. That's exactly what GridPane is. I mean, I think you gave our little rant here. You know, we're the world's first, you know, hosting control panel exclusively built for WordPress professionals. We simply just automated all of those aspects: staging, backups, performance, upgrades, all of the pillars of managed WordPress. They can all be done primarily through full software automation. And then the big leap from there to truly managed comes into the quality of the support and the engineers that are on the back end of that, you know? And so you'll see places that they'll claim to be managed, or they'll manage the cloud for you or whatever. If you see really consistent bad reviews of their support, that's usually a good indication that they're not quite managed. because they're, there's unfortunately, again, it's just a really sexy term, and you can sell effectively the same services for multiples of base fees by just slapping the word managed in front of it. Okay. So long as you know what you're getting, it's fine to have like a pseudo managed host. It's just important that you actually know that and you know what you're getting. So let's talk specifically about what we do differently and why I think it's really useful for LMS users and for really anybody that's doing sort of what I would call heavy transactional sites. So we still have all the same components. We have our software, which is really the primary thing that we've built, and then we have our support, which we invest a ton of money in. Most of our support is here in the United States. We have some in Europe. We spend a lot of money on this because it costs a lot to have outstanding support. But a key thing that we do is this whole infrastructure hardware layer here. We've kind of abstracted this out and we let you connect to any infrastructure you want in the entire world. So if you think about a host like, WP Engine, they're the biggest player in the game in managed WordPress, okay? They recently announced that they're shifting over to these new Google C2 instances, okay? This is just a new fast server that Google's rolling out. Well, that's infrastructure, servers, hardware, that's this hardware component that anyone can connect to. Like you can go straight to Google Compute Platform, you can sign up, you get like $300 free from them every single year. And using software like ours or using software like RunCloud or Server Pilot, you can connect directly to those resources and you don't have to pay an upcharge to access that infrastructure. So I don't want to pick on any one provider, but a lot of the biggest players in the game, WP Engine is no different. It behooves them for you to not really know what the infrastructure is that you actually get, the actual specific allocation of hardware. Because if you knew that, you might go, well, am I getting good value for money? And so they have outstanding software and they have outstanding support, but a lot of the companies that are most successful, they try and do things to make it obscure. They do things like PHP workers. They do things that sort of make it, gray as to what the actual the hardware is behind the scenes. And so we don't do that. I'll actually show a quick little demo here. Let me switch screens. Stop sharing that. And I'll switch over to my primary desktop here. So this, can you see, just one second here. Can you see this here?
Yeah, a control panel of sorts?
Yeah. So you see DigitalOcean, Vultr, Linode, AWS Lightsail. So these are all major infrastructure providers that we connect to natively. And you create an account with those companies and you drop your API key into GridPane so that we can communicate to your account on your behalf.
Can I provide an example?
Yes.
Use case? I've always heard that DigitalOcean is more for developers. So as a non-developer myself, if on a personal project, I'm likely not to go to it. But is what you're saying is I could use DigitalOcean through GridPane, and now my non-developer self could leverage that, right?
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, that's something that we get a lot where people are confused about using our platform and they're like, well, I don't know how to manage my own servers. To which I say, great, don't touch them. Don't ever touch them.
Yeah.
Literally all you need to do, you can go to DigitalOcean, you sign up in seconds, you give them your credit card. We actually have coupon codes where I think you can get like $50 free for 2 months. And then you log into your account, you just get your API key, which is inside your profile, and you drop that into GridPane. And now you never have to go back to DigitalOcean ever again. Okay. So I have my API key attached here for this account, and I can say, Chris's new server. I can choose whatever price I want. This is the actual hard price of the server through them. We're not charging any VIG or override on this. We say $20. we select the region. So let's say you're building an LMS in London for whatever reason. You want to help people learn yoga in London. You click create server, and it's now communicating with DigitalOcean, and it's building a box on your behalf. It's building a server on your behalf, okay? So our software has orchestrated that hardware component to the degree that you don't ever have to touch it anymore, okay? So that's gonna run in the background. That'll take about 15 minutes altogether. But I've already built another one. I actually built it at 1:47. So I don't know exactly when it finished, but I've got another box here that we can actually test and do a site demo on. But this is effectively what we've done. So the reason that this thing exists is because I ultimately ended up canceling an account for the second time with a really large player in the managed hosting space because I got very, very frustrated that they couldn't solve effectively I got to a level where if I had a problem, their technical support was not going to be able to help me. And so I decided, to hell with it, I've got to solve this problem. And so what I ultimately set out to do was build sort of an internal arsenal of tools for my company. And the more we invested in that, the more we worked on that, the more I realized that this was the more interesting business. That the tool to do the job right didn't exist. We had to build it. And the more that we invested in it, the more we realized that this was more interesting, you know, so that we can actually, so I could effectively work with people that were more like me as opposed to people who needed end user hosting. Okay. So
that's the innovation of the hosting control panel concept, which is this is a new idea.
Yeah. And there's other players in the space that, you know, there's companies like RunCloud and there's companies like ServerPilot that they do some of these things, but they don't have the specific focus down to WordPress. So really what I set out to do 5 years ago was to build an alternative to Kinsta and Pagely and WP Engine. And again, the tool didn't exist. And so once I started working on that, I realized, well, actually, I want to be able to make the tool accessible to people. And I don't need to take any money on the infrastructure because someone else is already doing that. And they're doing a really good job. Google does a really good job at this. Amazon does a really good job at this. DigitalOcean, Vultr, Linode. They're all creating downward price pressure and increasing performance and features. And just every single day, like more and more of that hardware, which is sort of confusing and nebulous, is becoming much more affordable. It's becoming commoditized, and it's really available to the consumer now in a way that it just wasn't 5 years ago. And we're taking that ball and running with it. You know, we're going as far as we can with it. So I'm going to let this run because again, that'll take about 15 minutes. But I want to switch back and show you sort of a couple more reasons why this thing exists and what it is that's specific about it that works for LMS. Just 1 second here. Okay, let's see. It says there we go. Okay, so part of the reason that this thing exists, shameless ploy here at the family, is basically I got really, really frustrated with all of the constant minutia and the problems that I had to deal with, even when I was at a managed host. Because if you have a lot of clients that you're servicing, if there's a problem, they always come back to you. They always come back to the person that developed the site anyway. So if I was going to have to do the wet work, I might as well keep some of the margin, you know?
Yeah.
And so really what it was is there was sort of this combination of these 4 different things that I absolutely hated that really, you know, caused me to build GridPane. And it was, the first one was that like minutia. All the tedium, all the boring tasks that actually make your job not particularly fun when you're building websites. Like when you're building a site, you've already got enough to deal with. You know, you don't want to have to worry about updates. You don't want to have to worry about backups. You don't want to have to worry about all these other things, you know. Big one was reliability. And we do some really cool things in the context of like high availability and allowing people to have sites fail over. So even if a whole server or a whole data center goes down, your site still doesn't go down in the middle of the night. And that's an area where unfortunately there hasn't been a lot of investment and innovation in the hosting space. Time, my most valuable asset, time with my family, time on the golf course, time with my dog. Everything in our platform, we've tried to streamline down to the point where if you can find something that takes more than 3 clicks, you found a bug. Okay, we want everything in the platform to be single click and you're there, you know, or as few clicks as possible. And then the big thing for me was autonomy. Like having ownership and control over this aspect of my business, so I would know exactly what it was going to cost. I would know that I could go into a new market or literally a new region in the world and have hosting running in a place that, you know, that I never will go to. You know, I may never make it to Sydney, but I can build a box in Sydney in 15 minutes and host clients there. You know,
that was a problem for us. I just want to iterate, like we had an agency and we actually had some of our biggest clients, there was a cluster of them in Australia. So all this latency and everything was important, super important.
Yeah.
So I totally get that.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing is, you know, we constantly get people asking us, how can I make my sites faster? Well, serve your site closer to your end customer. You know, like if you have a server on the East Coast and all of your customers are on the West Coast, the speed of light is fast, but 3,000 miles is still 3,000 miles, you know, and there's 17 computers that it has to jump through to get from San Francisco to New York. So just build a server in San Francisco and serve your customers close by, you know? So, yeah, let's jump back to the demo. Let me check my screens here. Yeah, that's still running, but actually I can show you this other site. Because I built one before we even got going here. So I built this LifterLMS site in Toronto. That's one of the closest data centers to me right now in Michigan. So it's, you know, I did it to benefit myself in terms of that latency question. But I'm gonna go up here and build this new site, which thanks to your fantastic thinking in headlines, this is a domain that I now own. If I spelled it right, hosting demystified, okay? So you type in the URL for the site that you want to build. You choose your server. So I'm going to choose the LifterLMS server that I built a little while ago. If I wanted to pick a system user, I could. That's basically to just isolate accounts from one another. So you could have multiple accounts on a given box. And then here's a key feature is our bundles feature. So other companies call this Blueprint or Canvas. This is basically what this allows me to do is have a set collection of themes, plugins, everything that I want so that the site is built exactly the way that I want right out of the gate. And so I can choose that LifterLMS bundle. If I had a Cloudflare account attached to my Lando Calrissian demo account here, I would be able to automatically update the IP address. And so the site could go live instantly. And then I also have staging sites and automatic updates, which we can talk about. But so now I just click build, and now once again, our dashboard is talking to that server, and it's not only is it building WordPress for us, but it's building all of those plugins and themes, and it's adding in every single thing that we want, so that when we go to log into the site, it's live and it's ready to go. I'll show you real quick what bundle I'm installing because it's applicable. Just one second here. Let's go down here to bundles. So you can create as many bundles as you want. If you had a real estate business, if you had a bunch of real estate clients, you could have a real estate bundle. If you had, you know, if you had an LMS that was geared towards yoga clients or an LMS that's geared towards, you know, continuing medical education, you might have different bundles for those people based upon different themes. But this is just the LifterLMS bundle that I put together. Oh boy. Looks like I didn't put anything in there. Well, I can demonstrate how you would do it. So you can basically just add in a theme link. So you'll see here when you go to add new theme, you can either add a link, which would be like a link to a Dropbox link. So if you had a premium plugin or theme, you could drop it in that link format. Or if it's in the WordPress catalog, it's just the last slug of what it is. So for example, if I wanted to add WordFence for whatever reason, it would just be WordFence because that's the end of the plugin slug for that item. And so what you can do now is you could go through and you could say, oh, I see what I did. I switched my account. Sorry. I knew that I had created one. Just one second here. because I added in I just bought LifterLMS because, as you know, I'm building an LMS for our community. And so I just downloaded all the stuff that I wanted and I put it into a bundle. Yeah, here. So now I have all of these specific plugins that are my premium Lifter plugins. And then I have the theme that I want. So I'm going to go with Launchpad, but I put Astra and Ocean in there, and I'm activating Launchpad and I'm activating LifterLMS. If I'd done this in the right order, I probably could have activated all of them, you know, but these are probably going to complain if you go to activate them and the primary plugin isn't active. But at the end of the day, it's going to install all of this stuff for me. Okay. So if I jump back over here to sites and I scroll down here, we're testing without a net here. So who knows if this will actually work. So it looks like we've got our hosting demystified site here. That's working. Let's do a single sign-on into it, which if the DNS is resolved, hopefully we'll see the right thing. If for some reason we can't get the DNS working, what I can do here is I can just look and see, here's my admin username, here's my admin password. Those things are generated automatically. So you don't have to generate a username and password every single time. So we can just grab these creds, jump right in, and we should see fully functional site. And we can start horsing around inside here, you know. And so one other thing I want to show you is, so one question that we get from people is, okay, I get it, plugins is cool. I can add themes, I can add all this stuff, but what if I want data? Like I want the
sample
site
content.
Yes, I want sample content. I want my, you know, I want my API keys to already be in there. I want everything to be authenticated already. So in that case, what you could do is you could say, I want to go to my hosting demystified site, and I could actually go into my backups and I could choose to clone the site. Okay. So I could choose to clone the site completely as is, straight over to, I could do it to another site on the same server. I could do it to another server on a different box. And so a good idea is to actually have, you know, sort of like a boilerplate that you always have access to, you know, that it's just like, oh, there's my, you know, that's just an even faster alternative to bundles, basically. And so that gives you all your sample data. And so if you have a really good site that you like, you can just clone it to a brand new one and proceed, you know. Let me see what I've got in my slides here. So where were we? Yeah, so we've got a demo, we've got cloning, we've got bundles. So three big things that I think are really important. No matter, GridPane is useful in this context, but you can take these three things and apply it to almost any host that you would want to use, okay? The big thing is that almost all LMSs, when they're built right, you inevitably have lots of content, you have lots of tests and quizzes, you have, you know, it's heavy. It's a lot heavier than sort of your standard brochure site. And so having your own dedicated hardware where you're using your own VPS is really, really important, okay? Because, you know, when you're looking at those situations of, if you're at a provider where you have, you know, a limit on the number of PHP workers, well, when you're running your own VPS, the only limit is the physical resources of the box, you know, which you can be scaling up at any time, okay? So infrastructure, actually direct access to the hardware is a really big one, okay? This middle graphic here is for high frequency. So if you haven't heard about that, that's sort of the rage now in all hosting. That's like the Google C2 instances. Those are what are known as high frequency boxes. All that means is that the processors, the real engine of the server runs much faster, okay? And so for LMS, that is really, really, really huge, because especially when you have, like I was working on It was not a LifterLMS site. It was a competitor's LMS that will remain unnamed. They were running these quizzes, and it's doing all of these sort of recursive checks to see if people are cheating in the quiz, and it's very, very transactionally heavy. And it sort of makes MySQL, which is the database, it just implodes. So by having high frequency, you can kind of get around that. Okay, so no matter where you are, a lot of the big players now, Kinsta, WP Engine, they're all moving in the direction of these high frequency boxes. If you're doing something self-managed, whether it's with GridPane or you use something like RedCloud, I highly recommend steering towards those high frequency or those dedicated CPU. Like when you look at DigitalOcean, they call it dedicated CPU, okay? And then the third one is just backups. Backups are absolutely essential in any context, but the more customers you get and the more classwork they get built into their LMS, you really need to make sure that you're not making any mistakes in that regard. And so that's why generally you want a platform that's automating as much of that for you as possible. And when possible, I also recommend having your own third-party backups separate from all of that, okay? So that, you know, God forbid, worst case scenario, Patrick gets hit by a bus, you know, and for whatever reason, GridPane goes down, you still have your own backups at Dropbox or Wasabi or wherever it is, okay? And so those are three key areas of focus that I think are super important no matter where you are, you know, but definitely it's things that we focus on heavily with GridPane because they are so important. I think that's the bulk of what I have for just sort of broad strokes presentation. And mostly I just wanted to leave it as open as possible for questions, because I think that you had said that you had you thought that you would get a lot of questions from your users. I have not checked the chats. So
yeah, let me MC it for you. And I've got some coming up of my own as well. But first, John is asking about your control panel.
Yeah.
He's asking if this is an alternative to Cpanel.
Yes. So in that sort of triangle of hardware, software, and support, one of the most common software stacks that you'll find is Cpanel. It's pretty much Cpanel and Plesk are like 90+% of the internet. Okay.
And what are those? What is the job to be done by those? I mean, I know when I signed up on a hosting account and there's like the Cpanel, like I remember back in the day when you would like add WordPress through there and stuff. Like, what are these control panels doing?
Yeah, so Cpanel, the part of the popularity of Cpanel is that it really is sort of a jack of all trades web hosting control panel. So you can build WordPress websites, you can add email accounts, you can do SFTP, you can install, usually they have like Fantastico, which lets you install like 300 different scripts, you know. It lets you build all kinds of stuff. GridPane is an alternative to that in the sense that everything that is not related to WordPress is completely stripped away. Okay?
Like email, for an example?
Yes, email is completely stripped away. So just like managed WordPress providers, Kinsta, WP Engine, Pagely, we recommend best of breed providers for email, you know, on a totally separate platform. Okay.
Like Gmail, Google, right?
Exactly. Zoho, Rackspace, Google Suite, because you do not want email running on the exact same server as your WordPress websites. Okay. You want your WordPress website completely tuned to just do that one job. And when you add in email, not only do you add a huge like threat attack vector for hackers, but you also create a tremendous amount of performance burden on the machine that should be fully allocated to serving your site as quickly as possible. Okay, so Cpanel is super popular because they've been around for a long time and because it sort of does everything. Yeah. And the appeal from the host's perspective is what Cpanel does is it makes it very, very easy for them to have high density. That the primary objective of large scale hosts is they want as many people on a given server as possible. And so Cpanel helps them on the back end. You can't really see it happening, but it helps them on the back end sort of minimize and allocate resources so that you can't use up everything on the server, okay? Whereas with our control panel, we're connecting you to your own dedicated hardware that you get that entire box. There's nobody else on that system. And so we let you fully utilize all of the compute resources there.
Could you like unpack the dedicated, the virtual private server, the shared server, the managed, like
Yep.
what does it all really mean?
Yeah, so a good way to think about this is 98% of the time when someone says, I have a server, or we manage your servers for you, that is a virtual private server, okay? When we say dedicated resources, we don't mean necessarily dedicated server, okay?
Hardware.
So dedicated hardware, right? So a dedicated server, a true dedicated server, which very, very few people have, is a physical box in that tall rack of computers. You might have, you know, they're all usually like, you know, they start at about 2 inches tall and they go to, you know, the size of like a computer that you might see on your desk. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're stacked in, you know, like pizza boxes stacked up. If you've got a dedicated server, one of those is entirely yours. Okay.
Yeah.
Most people, when you go to DigitalOcean, when you go to AWS, when you go to any of these sort of cloud infrastructure providers, what they're doing is they'll have a bunch of servers in that physical rack, and they're using software virtualization to just break off a piece of that just for you. Okay. And so you can sort of picture, you know, a top-down view of sort of that pizza box of the server. You've got one slice. Okay.
Yeah.
It's your slice. It's just yours. And no one can take the toppings off of your piece.
Right.
Okay. But there are other people on that same physical infrastructure, but those are their pieces, you know, like you're not going to eat their stuff and they're not going to eat yours. So most of the time when people say I have a server, they actually mean I have a virtual private server. And when people say the cloud, when we're managing the cloud for you,
that was my next question.
That's just a virtual private server. Okay. That's all it is. Okay. And so shared hosting takes it even a step further, where you don't have any dedicated piece of the computer. You're basically getting little bites at the apple, all like, and so what you can end up having is you get what's known as the noisy neighbor problem, where you might be using a ton of the resources on the server and I'm not. And so my site runs slower because your site is the noisy neighbor. Okay. And so shared hosting is perfectly fine for sort of brochure sites, but when you start looking at LMS, you really need your own dedicated RAM. You want your own dedicated processors. You know, you want to go in the direction of a VPS, but it is confusing when you hear dedicated resources. Sometimes you think dedicated server, and that's not actually what's happening. Okay, it's rare when you hear bare metal. That also is a phrase that is interchangeable with a dedicated server. Bare metal meaning you actually get direct access to that physical resource, okay? And it's just all your own.
That's awesome. And just type yes or thank you in the chat if you appreciate Patrick. I think his ability to teach on this technical topic is awesome. I want to go to some questions from Matthias. Can you use GridPane with Windows servers?
No. So
Isn't that a WordPress limitation?
No, you can run WordPress on a Windows server. I don't recommend it, but you can. So all of those default providers, DigitalOcean, Vultr, Linode, AWS, we automatically provision a Ubuntu 18.04 Linux server. And then you might have noticed we've got that custom option on the far right. That allows you to connect to any infrastructure provider anywhere in the world. So let's say you're in Europe and you want to use Hetzner. They're super popular over there. You could basically provision your resources directly at Hetzner, and then you just run one command. Like you would add in the details of that server, and then you just run one command, and it's off to the races. But yeah, there are operating system limitations, and we are not compatible with Windows. And I would recommend not hosting Nginx on a Windows environment. If you look at the largest providers in the space, all the ones that I've mentioned, but then if you look at just WordPress.com and the Automatic Group, which is the parent company of WordPress, all of them are running Linux as the operating system, and invariably they're running Nginx as the web server, and that's just not what you're gonna find on a Windows box. It's doable, but again, it's like bicycle versus car is kind of how I look at that.
I'm just going to cut in line for just a second. I
Yeah.
met a guy when I was in Rome backpacking at a hostel, and we became friends and we've kept in touch over the years. He's the part of the Ubuntu's product and strategy team. He's one of the top Ubuntu guys. I have no idea what is Ubuntu. I'm trying to wrap my head around.
So that's just so sort of just a flavor of so there's the Linux operating system, which if you want to go way back in the day, there was the Unix operating system that I believe was developed by Sun Microsystems, but I might be dating myself here.
Okay.
And then a guy named Linus Torvalds created an open source version of that, which is Linux, which has subsequently become Red Hat. There was Slackware. Ubuntu is a popular one. There's all these different flavors of Linux, and it's just different people who've sort of picked up that work and decided to build, in a direction. And they're one of the most successful. They're not as successful and profitable, I don't believe, as Red Hat. Red Hat really sort of, they were one of the first companies that proved that you could give away software and ultimately still become a multi-billion-dollar company. And so they're just different flavors. So it's the closest equivalency would be sort of iOS versus Android. If there were different flavors, actually that's a good one. So in Android, there's like Cookie Bar and like the different names of them. That's just really sort of versions. These are just sort of competing companies, but they're all using kind of the same underlying guts. It's just they're taking it and adding their own opinionated approach to it.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. You've helped me understand a friend of mine who has been at it for a long time. And I'm a technologist too.
Yeah.
So Matthias asked, what aspects of the server are controlled by GridPane? Can you still run other software on the server without interfering with GridPane? Or does GridPane require full ownership of the server?
So a couple key things. So like as a counterpoint to companies like Cloudways, for example, Cloudways owns your server. Like when you sign up for them, you might get like an $11 account. You then get a $5 server from DigitalOcean, which they pay for with their credit card, and they give you sort of restricted access to it. The way that we have everything set up, your boxes at DigitalOcean, your servers, those virtual private servers, they are 100% yours. You can do with them whatever you want. You own them. Now with that said, basically our line is, you own the server, you can do whatever you want with it. If you want to install Mautic or Joomla or Drupal or other things on there, you absolutely can do that. The catch is, you break it, you buy it. Pretty much. Like what we recommend is don't do anything that can break our side of things. And if you're concerned about that, just spin up another server and then let that be just sort of your sacrificial lamb that we don't have to support. We have people who are constantly running things concurrently on their boxes, the boxes that we've provisioned and we manage for them. But if for example, you installed Drupal, none of our staging scripts, none of our backup automations, none of that stuff is going to work for that. And it may actually cause problems. So just be mindful. We have people asking us all the time, hey, can I just put a static HTML website in there? Absolutely. Add in, LifterLMS.com as your URL, build the WordPress site, and then just log in and delete everything, and then just upload your stuff. It'll work perfectly fine. It's just then if you tried to do like a staging push, it would go, where's WordPress? And it would sort of fall on its face, So yes, you can do that, but just be careful and understand that our de facto position is we always assume that we screwed up. And so we'll try and fix it. But if we get in there and it's like, oh, Chris, you just broke it again. Please stop doing this. We've never had to kick anybody off the platform for not behaving in that regard, but we have had people where it's just like, yeah, you can't run that stuff on our boxes anymore. Like just segregate it off and run it on the dedicated box.
Could you speak to that? How does it work with, like, let's say you have one site or you're doing like tons and tons of sites with GridPane? Like, okay, could you speak to that?
Yeah. So a good rule of thumb, we get this question out, like, how many sites could I run on a box? So here's some general rules of thumb. Don't build a box that's smaller than 2 gigabytes of RAM, okay? So that's about $10. At DigitalOcean, Vultr, Linode, all the providers, that's about $10. We're actually going to be removing the $5 options pretty soon, because we've had some people that built a $5 box and then they put like 30 sites on it. You know, not a good idea, okay? Yeah. So don't go any lower than $10. And then a good rule of thumb is don't build more than 10 sites per gigabyte of RAM. So right out of the gate, you got a $10 box. You could probably put upwards of 20 sites on that box. Now there's provisos to that, especially for this group. And that is, if you're doing LMS, you should probably divide by at least 4 or 5 and maybe even 10. Okay, so you might only want to put 1 or 2 LMSs on a box of that size.
It's heavy.
Because it's heavy, but it totally depends. You know, I mean, we've seen really, really lean builds, and we've seen stuff that you know, makes my skin crawl in terms of the efficiency of the code base. And so it's all sort of back in the napkin math. There's no hard and fast answer to it, but again, about 10 sites per gigabyte of RAM. You do get sort of economies of scale though as you go up. So if you had like a box that had 8 gigabytes of RAM, you could probably get more than 80 sites on it if you wanted to. You might get 100 or 120. I normally recommend don't go beyond that, because at the end of the day, the thing that's cool about all of these different companies is a $20 box from company A and a $40 box from company B. It's pretty much linear, the resources that you get. So you might as well have, instead of one $80 server, get 4 $20 servers and put them all over the place, okay? And don't overload them. You can monitor how much resources are being used, and just, you know, be smart about it. You know, don't overload your boxes, because while we can help and we can go, hey, you know, that's a totally overloaded box. You know, we do get people all the time that they hit us up and they're like, hey, my site's down, you know, and we go and we look and it's like they've completely filled their box. Like they've literally filled the hard drive of the box, and MySQL goes down and things die, you know. And so that's part of the problem of letting people do whatever they want to do. Yeah. By letting them have unfettered access to the box and not taking away the reins, they can do some silly things, you know. But yeah, hopefully that answers sort of what you're looking at. Anything like LMS and e-commerce, yeah. I normally say 1 per box. That's what I would recommend. And the way that I look at it is, it's a business, you know.
Yeah, it's a platform.
You're building a business. So $20, you know, for 1 box, that's your whole LMS. You've got to, you know, you could have an LMS that was doing thousands of dollars in MRR on a $20 box. You know, so why cheat and like, well, I'll stick my cousin's website on there also because I don't want to build another box. It's like, have your cousin throw you $10, you know, build them another server. So that's my take on it. But we have people all over the map. You know, we have people who have hundreds of servers. Well, we have people with hundreds of servers. We have people with hundreds of sites on single servers, and we have sort of everything in between. And I'm sort of, I think for static sites, sort of brochure sites, sure, put 2 or 3 dozen on a box, because they don't get a lot of traffic. They're not transactionally heavy. Yeah. But WooCommerce and LMS, just make the proper investment. You know, just give them their own breathing room. You know,
there's a close cousin to this question, which is concurrent users. Like, so people ask all the time in like pre-sales or even after they buy or whatever, like, how many concurrent users can LifterLMS handle? Help me answer that question, Patrick.
Okay. So the really short answer is it depends. Yeah. So as a for instance, a standard static site, just like sort of a blank vanilla, 2020 theme, we do load testing all the time where we'll throw 5,000 concurrent users at like a $10 or a $20 box, and they don't skip a beat. Okay, but that's a static site that's being served out of cache. Okay, so this other LMS that I was working with that had this insane bloated code base, and they weren't using Lifter. They had these webinars that were running every Friday, and twice a day on Friday they would run a webinar and then they would do a quiz, and like 60 people would take the quiz at the exact same time, and the box would fall flat on its face. Okay. It just overloaded the server. So 60 concurrent users taking a heavy quiz on a box that was $40.
And that's not even that much traffic. Like 60 people is not a lot. I mean,
it's really not. I mean, 60 people taking the quiz in the span of like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
That's pretty heavy. And that's another thing where people don't really understand concurrency. I had 500 people on my site today. Well, that literally means in any one given instant, you had less than one person. Like it's just, somebody's there and they look around and then they're gone. And so true concurrency, it's
not traffic, it's concurrency. Right?
Yes, exactly. And so what we did with that customer, again, they were spending, actually, I think it was about $60. It was about a $60 server. And we ended up putting them on a $200 server. Yeah. And then a week goes by and I hit the guy up and I said, so I guess they just canceled the class today. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, the box just idled. It never went above single digit CPU utilization. It was just like, 3, 5, 6%, and it never went higher. And he's like, no, they ran the test. And so clearly we sort of overshot.
Yeah.
And so now you can sort of back down, but it's highly dependent upon what's on the page, how well was it built, how efficient, is the code base, and how much true concurrency you have. But that sort of gives you an idea, 50, 60, 100 concurrent users, you can't run that on a box that costs less than $100. But a box that costs $200, it breezes right through it, And so you sort of have to, in that range, as you're scaling up. But keep in mind, again, for them to have 60 or 75 people on a quiz concurrently, that's an LMS that actually has thousands of users. They're just randomly coming in and taking their tests at that time. Some of them are doing self-paced stuff. They're not coming in to do the quiz right then. And so they have thousands of people on that thing, but it was just 75 people taking the quiz all at once, and it would crater that smaller box. And so as we get more and more use cases in, I think we'll have better guidance around sort of a more specific sort of, calculator of, oh, you're going to have this many concurrent users. This is what your pages look like. Okay, you're going to want to have a server that's about this size. One thing I will say, all the infrastructure providers, they make it really easy to size up. They make it impossible to size down. Yeah. So start small, start reasonably, test, see what you get. And if you're noticing that you're trending above, 50, 60, 70% utilization, then you can scale up. You can what's known as vertically scale. You can basically log into DigitalOcean and say, I need to double the size of this box. And in the time that it takes for it to basically power down the server and power it back up, you now have a server that's twice as fast, okay? Or you have twice as much capacity, for concurrency at that point. So you can, with 5 minutes of downtime, you can scale up pretty quickly.
I think that's great. And I just want to concur, just seeing the market, what they want is they want to be able to move the calculator around to their unique situation, be like, okay, get this one.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's something. That you and I need to be building. Is basically taking the combined research that you have of all of your customers, and then us looking at it from the infrastructure side, and actually help build some kind of calculator for them. I think that would be interesting.
They just need help, because a lot of people, they just don't know what they're looking at when they're looking at. I mean, they know what they have, like they know how many students they have, and they know like if it's asynchronous or synchronous and whatnot. So
yeah.
Kartik has a question. If we're using GridPane and we are doing it for our clients, and we're like, okay, we'll build a site, we'll host the site, this is the price, this is the monthly maintenance and hosting fee that we mark up for our client, just so they just don't even have to touch it. We just do the quote website.
Yeah.
The question is, how do we add a status page for clients? And then I'll just also tie that into Braden's question around how do we monitor server resources? So how do we monitor them, and then can we make that data available to other places?
Yes. So, so the short version is you can build, you can use status page services like status page. I use Uptime Robot. Actually, we just switched to a different one. I think it's Sorry. I think that's what we're using right now. It's called Sorry, which I really, I like the name of that one. So you can build your own status page. And so one thing that's useful is if you get a status page that's one of the widely used ones, they'll have tie-ins to infrastructure providers. So one thing that happens with us all the time, people will hit us up and they'll say, hey, my site's down. And I'll go, or I had a bunch of outages, and I'll go and look at their box, and their box will be up at that time, and I'll look in their logs, and there won't be anything in the logs. And then I go and I check the status page at DigitalOcean, and it's like, oh, DigitalOcean in Frankfurt was down. Okay, so one benefit of paying for like a status page is they have direct tie-ins already to Vultr, DigitalOcean, all those different providers. And so your status page could automatically just show, hey, oh, our site's down because we're using an uptime monitoring service to know that our site's down. But then the reason that it's down is because DigitalOcean is down, And so you would probably want to have that hosted someplace else, especially if you've only got one server with us, because if your main site is down, even if you were running a status page inside that same server, that status page is now going to be down. Also.
It happens to us, if somebody on the team's like, hey, Slack's down, or is Trello working for you? Or if you had to go there to check and it's gone, it doesn't tell you anything.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why most of the status pages for companies are hosted elsewhere. They're hosted by independent, third-party services. In terms of knowing whether or not the site's up, I strongly recommend off-site third-party, again, Uptime Robot is a great one. I can share my screen here again. Just one second, and I'll show you. It looks like all of these should be running. Let me see. So right inside our dashboard here, you've got this stats package, which is actually the Monit service. And so this is showing everything that's running on the box. And this is basically super nerdy, probably more detailed than most people want. It just shows this server. We built this server 17 hours ago. It's just a test server. The status of all of the microservices is okay. The amount of disk space, the backup sizes haven't exceeded our allowable threshold. The total file system is 22% utilized. Here's how much of the RAM's utilized. Here's how much CPU. You can also view these things inside of the provider themselves. So we're changing our UI to add in more stats and to sort of beautify this view. But if you go straight to DigitalOcean, you can see really detailed stats on that as well. So hopefully that answers sort of what they're looking for.
That does. Michael has a question, and somebody else had it too, related to video hosting. Typically, what we say at LifterLMS is you don't want to host your own videos, use Vimeo Pro or Wistia. Some people do they just want full ownership, so they'll put it on Amazon and figure out how to get it in the site. Do you have any comments, just because video is so important to most course creators, about just video, and if you want to host it yourself and not use one of those third-party tools, or would you just push back and sort of say the same thing, that maybe you should not get into the video hosting business? Where do you stand on this conversation?
Yeah, so I have sort of a love-hate in this space. Before I started GridPane, part of me wanted to build an alternative to Wistia because it's just too expensive. And I didn't like that I couldn't control certain things. So I feel you. If you want to host your own videos, I definitely feel you. I went way down this rabbit hole. And I've looked at all of the open source packages out there because that's generally where I start whenever I'm thinking about a new project. It's well, what's the best version of an open source project that someone has kicked the can as far as they possibly can? I don't think that any of them are ready for mainstream. If they are, they're already an enterprise offering. I highly recommend. We use Vimeo. We use YouTube, obviously, for sort of marketing centric videos. Another one that we're using right now that I like quite a bit is Cloudflare Stream. Their streaming service. It's $5 a month minimum. but you get a ton for that. You know, it's a really good value for money, and those videos load immediately all around the world. But at the end of the day, they're your boxes, you know, they're your sites. And so we have people that are uploading, you know, they're uploading MP4 videos direct to their boxes, and they're serving right off of their boxes. And
Michael, the person asking the question, says he's going to be having 2 terabytes of video content by the end of 2021. So
yeah, I wouldn't do that. I mean, the biggest thing is that, so it's, I mean, you have one nice thing about all these providers, about all of these ones that we natively connect to, like, we'll look at their pricing here. You get really, really generous bandwidth allocations with these companies. So even on a $10 deal here at DigitalOcean, you've got 2 terabytes of transfer, okay? Like, that's pretty aggressive. No, I mean, 99% of your customers are not even going to remotely touch that, you know?
But there's that one guy who's going to host the video.
Yeah, there's the one guy who's going to host 2 terabytes. Like, he's got 2 terabytes worth of video. If they all get viewed only once, then he's burned that up.
Yeah.
And so obviously you can go higher. One thing you may want to consider, you said it was Michael.
Yeah.
Is you may want to consider looking at a true dedicated server provider like OVH. I don't love them for their support, but I do love them for their prices. And I do love the fact that they have unmetered bandwidth. And what unmetered bandwidth is there's no restrictions. You know, you can use as much bandwidth as you want. They start to throttle you at a certain threshold. But the thing is that, you know, the reason that Wistia exists, the reason that Vimeo exists, the reason that now Cloudflare Stream exists is because if you're just serving from one box, and now you've got a bunch of customers in Australia, that stuff has to go through, you know, it's got to go under the ocean, it's going to go halfway around the world, and it's all coming from one box. And it's just, you know, you've got all kinds of latency issues, and I think about the end customer, you know, yeah. And I think, you know, if I start serving a video, if I want to serve, you know, high quality training content to a customer that I want to charge a premium price to, they better get that stuff immediately. You know, yeah. It better, no matter what the device is, it should be encoded specifically for their device, and all of those things. Doing it offline, doing it yourself, I just really don't recommend it. I get the desire, but I don't think it's the way to go.
That's where I ended up. Like, I'll just let Vimeo Pro and Wistia do the heavy lifting. And
yeah.
I mean, that's what they do.
Yeah, and it is expensive. You know, like, the stuff all adds up, but it's a business. You know, I mean, it's an investment, you know, and it's, I mean, I think in the long run, you'll end up spending more money, certainly with your time, the value of your time allocated in. And so I say, just pay, you know, delegate that problem away. You know, it's like $20 a month, something like that for Vimeo. Actually, remind me, I'll try and find it. There's a new service that Vimeo just launched that makes it really easy to make like 10-minute long videos. Like, it combines like stock images and stock video to knock out quick like marketing videos. And I think it's about $30 a month for this service. And they give you the $50 a month Vimeo Pro account. Yeah. And so it's like, I don't know why they're doing it. They're literally they're cannibalizing their own business with this other model, but it's like, you can pay $30 and you get this extra tool, and then you get their $50 plan, you know? So,
well, that's innovation, just adding more value and expanding. The customers also need help with editing and high quality videos. So you bundle it. It makes sense.
Yep. Well, it's another gateway into, now that I have a Vimeo Pro account, I'm looking at the next one up, which is the stream, you know, the streaming.
Vimeo Live.
Yeah. It's so it's like, whatever, they got me in the door, and they lost $20. It's like it's all pretty much profit when you're at that scale. So
we got a question coming in from the Facebook Live audience. Paul is asking, do you have any scripts for migrating websites to GridPane, or like, what's your stance on migration? Like, if somebody's going to come into GridPane, what do you got for them?
Yeah. So
And they're
all
not
of our,
starting from the beginning. You're either starting from the beginning or you're migrating. So that's kind of.
yeah, exactly. And most of our customers, they come from other hosts, So the short version is, if you have an account at, say, Cloudways, or you have an account with another sort of control panel based host, we do have scripts that can automate the hell out of all of that stuff. So I moved like 87 sites for a guy recently, and it took me a minute to type in the script and run it, and it took 55 minutes for all of those sites to be migrated across. There was like over 100 gigs worth of sites. So if you're in that situation, definitely hit up our support, and we're happy to help. So basically what we do is, if you've got a pro account, you automatically get one migration. We'll do the migration for you. If you have a developer account, I think we do 3. And what we also do is we record us doing it. So we give you access to tools like all-in-one migration, for example. We recommend updrafts. We recommend sort of the plugin of your choice. But for the first one's always free. We'll do it and record it and show you how we did it, so then you can do the rest of them. Unfortunately, providers like, a lot of managed providers, they use the pain of disconnect of, it's a real hassle to migrate stuff away. And so they don't make it possible for us to automate the migrations out from them. And so we're in talks with Blog Vault. We're going to be integrating Blog Vault. That's another popular one. But yeah, so if you're coming from a managed environment, generally speaking, you got to kind of move them one at a time. If you're coming from an environment where you can log in and you have SSH access, that's sort of what to ask your host. If you have SSH access, and if you can run WP-CLI, that's the WordPress command line interface, then we can probably help automate moving all of those sites over for you.
That's great. And just a question from Ellen related to that. She's considering moving from another host, and she's just asking, do you do consultations prior to purchase? So what do you have for people if they're interested in GridPane and they want to talk or email or whatever? Like what are the options?
Yeah. So right now inside the platform, if anybody signs up, you all paid accounts, you get a 2-week free trial, and shameless plug time. We'll make sure everybody gets this link. This coupon, LifterLMS 2020, if you follow that link, what that does will actually give you 2 more months free, okay, on a developer account. So that's our top level account. You get a total of 10 weeks.
I've never seen this before. Free hosting trial?
Yeah, so sort of. So basically, we're giving you a free trial to test our service, because at the end of the day, I'm a big believer in just testing things. If I can find something that's going to improve my business or make me better in some capacity, if it's going to help my golf game, I'll try almost anything, And so we want people to try it and see whether or not it's the right fit. We're not the right fit for everybody. There's some people who come in and they never feel comfortable, or they're looking for, they get mad because it's only WordPress or whatever. So, test it out. If we don't earn the business, then we don't deserve the business. But so by using this link, you get a free developer account for 10 weeks. And then also, if you hit our support up, we have like those DigitalOcean coupons where it isn't, we do get an affiliate something. I don't know what it is. Our motivation primarily is you can sign up with DigitalOcean and you get, I think it's 2 months free and $50. So you could get like a $20 server, run it for 2 months. Our service is free for more than 2 months, and you're, risk-free essentially for 60 days. But once you're in the platform, you can schedule an onboarding call. Okay. And so before you even want to try it, you can actually, you can message us. They'll connect you with my executive assistant, Carrie, and you can either talk to myself or Bobby or one of the other sort of senior members of the customer success team. So you can absolutely talk to a live body before you get your credit card out. But if you sign up and you're in the platform, again, you got a free trial. You can just schedule the onboarding call right within the platform. And so we just, we get on the phone, talk with you for 30 minutes and just try and answer as many questions as we possibly can for you so that you realize whether or not it's a good fit for you.
That's awesome. I'm not going to let you off the hook because we have more time and there's more questions, and we have a hosting expert in the house, so I'm going to keep hitting you with more questions here.
Yeah, I have probably another 30 minutes,
Okay.
and then I have to race out of here. Otherwise, my wife will kill me because I've got to
Don't worry.
she's watching all three of our girls right now. So
no worries at
yeah,
all.
absolutely. Keep firing away.
We got a question about bulk plans for agencies. So like, you know, you might be using this for yourself, or you might be doing it for a bunch of clients. Like, how should somebody think about it if they're an agency offering, you know, the kind of, I wouldn't call it reselling, but they're just hosting it.
Yeah. So what I would probably recommend, you know, either of our accounts, pro or developer, you can run an LMS on them. The reason that we normally recommend developer for like an agency type business is you just get higher priority support. You get access to sort of like those high availability features. You get access to just more things that sort of align with an agency. But then we have conversations with people every day about sort of an enterprise conversation or a white label conversation where you can literally have your branding attached to GridPane. And I guess the simple version is you know, I'd say try it out, horse around with it, and then schedule a call with me if you want to see what it is specifically that your agency may have unique needs that sort of exceed what a base developer plan would get you. You know, like you might have 24 people on your team and you want 24 support seats. So we would have a conversation around that. But right now, I mean, it's effectively unlimited. You know, you can build as many sites as you want because the infrastructure cost is on you. But yeah, I mean, if you want to have a more involved agency conversation, I take like a half dozen of those every single week. And that's really sort of the direction that we're going. You know, we in the long run may get rid of our pro plan altogether.
Yeah, like who's your perfect fit customer?
Yeah, so our perfect fit customer is either agencies, people that are building lots of sites for people, or people who have one, you know, or a small handful of really successful sites, you know. And so like a good example, you know, probably 65% of our customers are agencies, but both of these customers in this little testimonial slide here, one of them runs Southern Living Plants, which they sell millions of dollars of plants direct to consumer through a WooCommerce site. And that's running on GridPane. They just have one site with us. You know, he has a developer account and he's got one site. And the reason he came to us is because he was at another provider where his costs for all of those PHP workers kept going up and up and up and up and up. And so, you know, he's paying for a plan where he's got like 20 sites, but he only had one site because he needed all of those PHP workers. And so he shifted over to us, and now he's just, you know, he knows exactly what his costs are for his infrastructure. But yeah, sort of perfect fit is someone who runs dozens of sites or just has, you know, one or two very, very serious production sites. You know, the people who can recognize the value, you know, people who are coming from like WP Engine, Kinsta, Flywheel, Liquid Web, those are the people that when they see us, they go, oh, this is an amazing value for money. You know, people who are sort of on the low end, who are brand new, they'll sometimes look at our pricing and go like, oh, and now I have to buy the server. Like, this is really expensive. And for a single site, it is, you know, it can be. But if you have a single site running at any of the managed providers and you start to scale up, you'll start to recognize the value of what it is that we're offering, you know. So the more value you're getting out of your site or sites, the easier it is to say, this is a slam dunk, you know.
Awesome. We got one question about Lifter. They're talking about gyms to their problems, and they're looking to do blended learning with Zoom and LifterLMS. LifterLMS isn't really a replacement for Zoom. Most of our most successful people use like both together. And we actually just published an article yesterday. We haven't promoted yet on our blog. We'll put a link to that in the chat. That goes into a deep dive about how to use LifterLMS with a gym owner or some kind of trainer or instructor. I think the answer to this next one is yes, but just to check with you, I think you covered this. Ashish asks, instead of making bundles with some plugins, can we create a full-fledged website with plugins and configurations and deploy that as a blueprint on new domains staging with one click. So basically, I think it's like that site template concept you were talking about. Is that right?
Yes, yes. So, so the short answer is no, that's not available yet. But it will be, and it wouldn't surprise me if we were done with that in May. The goal is ultimately going to be when you go to build a new site. I'm totally lost the thread here. You would go to build a new site, and you could say build site from template, from boilerplate, basically. So right now, what you could do is you could just build another site. Like I'm getting ready to build hostingmba.com. That's going to be for our internal, our customers, our GridPane customers. And so I could build that site. And so now it's just going to build a blank, totally vanilla site there. But then what I could do is go into hosting Demystified, the site that I built that has all that bundle stuff in it, and I could clone it to the site that I just built. So it's not one click, it's like 3, it's certainly less than 60 seconds. But in the long run, yeah, we will absolutely have the option to just choose a dropdown of like a blueprinted site or what I would probably call a boilerplate site. And then you're just, building it.
That's awesome. Kartik has a question just about like, what is the hosting MBA and what's the purpose of it? And to me, I just got to say, when I heard that, it made me so happy because like, if whatever your product or your service or your business is, like there's an education piece and like I call it move slow to move fast later. If you slow down and make an educational product to help the people, whether you're using LifterLMS or not, it's a good thing. And, what's your vision for the hosting MBA product or I shouldn't call it a product. Like, what is it? What are you doing?
Yeah, so we actually have 2 different courses that I'm going to be creating. One is sort of a boot camp or a challenge that's going to be sort of a condensed version of here's how to get started with GridPane. Here's how to get the biggest wins the fastest, and so that's one thing that we're building. But then hosting MBA is more of all in, I think it's going to be about a 12-week course that we're going to run. It's going to be somewhat interactive. There's going to be a webinar component. There's going to be straight lessons, modules, PDF reports, and checklists and things. The idea behind the hosting MBA is to really be able to not only use the GridPane platform and get every last drop, out of it, but it's to be able to then take that and build a real sustainable business off the back of that software by providing your end customer with managed hosting that's basically managed by us, but they don't need to know that. Okay. And so it's things like being able to quote a fee and justify a fee when they've got a sea of $10 a month competing noise in their face,
Yeah.
Like before I built GridPane, I had my own consulting business, an agency business that I ran for 13 years. I got really good in the last 3 or 4 years of getting higher and higher and higher fees, and not necessarily having to work harder, just being able to better connect with the right people and enunciate and message my value better. And part of that was being able to charge people $100 a month for hosting when, most people would go, oh my God, I'm not even going to pay $25. It's like, well, here's the value that this thing represents, and so it's about teaching you how to do all of those things so that you're not racing to the bottom. Okay. And so it's really about sort of creating an entire turnkey aspect, a turnkey business to latch on to whatever your existing offering is, whether it's you're an agency business, whether you just build LMSs for people and then you want to subsequently also offer them hosting. It's everything that I would do to build that business out, because ultimately that's what we did.
Man, I wish that was around in my agency days with, we were more of like a marketing automation, like WordPress, hardcore WordPress development, but we weren't sysadmins. And we ended up in some problem areas when if that had been around, it would have been way better for us.
Yeah. So it's going to be a premium price point course. We're giving it away to some people who were part of previous promotions. But yeah, it's going to be exactly the thing that I wish I had seen. I wish it had been there 5 years ago, because I just got off the phone with a guy today who had been talking to, I won't, again, I don't want to beat this dead horse, but he'd been talking to a handful of some of the big players across the hosting space. And you know, he ended up talking to me today, and he's like, I finally feel like I'm getting the right answers. You know, I finally feel like I'm talking to somebody that actually knows this stuff. And I told him, like, 5 years ago, that's exactly where I was. Like, I was talking to sysadmins all across the globe saying, how can I solve this problem? How can I make sure that that never happens to me again? And I didn't get a lot of answers that I liked. You know, I got a lot of lazy answers. And so I had to just smash my head through it until you know, I either built it or taught myself how to do it, or I found the right person to get the real answer, you know. And so it's going to be sort of a distillation of years of trial and error, basically.
Got some more questions. Ashish asked, do you offer API access so we can make that possible on our end? I'm not sure what that is referring to, but what do you have about the API?
Yeah. So we have an API right now. It's not documented, it's not publicly released, but that's coming very soon. Right now we use our API internally to, like, build a site. We have a, you know, build site API, and our front end application is talking to that on the back end. And so if you're thinking about, you know, I want to build, say, a WooCommerce interface where I'm going to sell a site and then it's going to provision those resources on the back end, yes, those things will be available. We are, some of the things that people have asked for, which really sort of get into the realm of what I would say is like an enterprise conversation. Some of those APIs won't be publicly available. They'll only be available to our enterprise customers, but sort of basic run-of-the-mill stuff where you might want to automate things on your end, build a site, change ownership, change PHP versions, change caching, that kind of stuff. We have API endpoints for all those things. We just have to document them and put them out. And then, unfortunately, because we've dealt with this recently, we've got to make sure that people don't abuse them, because we've had some people who just all of a sudden just started flooding our, you know, you give a mouse a cookie. You know, we had a couple of people that it was like, here's beta access to these things, and then they're just inundating and building like 1,000 sites in 5 minutes, and it's just like, you know, so yes, eventually you will be able to get access to those things, and we just have to sort of build the guardrails around it and build the documentation.
Does GridPane offer the same features as Webmin on a Linux machine? How do they compare?
Yeah, so Webmin is, you know, I mean, I guess the short answer is no, because Webmin is not specific to just WordPress. You can build kind of any site that you want on Webmin. But if you were to build a site on a WordPress site on Webmin, we do definitely everything that they do, and then some and better. I'll give you a real quick example. I mentioned the sort of one-click everything. So obviously you've seen how it is to build sites. Mm-hmm. But if I wanted to go in here to hosting Demystified, if I wanted to change the site owner, so, you know, I build the site under my system user and now I'm ready to give it over to another user, I can just change the site owner. I can add an auto SSL. I can change the PHP version. I can turn on a web application firewall. I can switch my caching settings. All of these things are literally, if I wanted to make this a WordPress multi-site, not that I ever recommend WordPress multi-site, you could just flip a switch and there you go. But yes, I mean, if it seems minimal, it's on purpose, you know, and actually when we rebuild the UI, I think we're going to pare things down even more. But what's interesting about it is that we're probably going to have two versions of the UI, kind of a basic and then an advanced, because we have hundreds of commands behind the scenes that you can go so far down the rabbit hole, customizing PHP, customizing Nginx, MySQL. You know, we have built features that we built that just don't exist anywhere else. And it's really just a matter of deciding how much we want to give people access to these things, because they could be dangerous if people don't know what they're doing. So we're trying to keep it as much as possible, just on, off, simple. Yep, now you got a web application firewall. But in the long run, obviously, we'll have things like people will be able to do super detailed rules, you know, whitelisting, blacklisting, all that kind of stuff.
Somebody's asking about sending backups. You mentioned doing off-site, like different options. Like, can you automatically send backups to Google Drive in addition to GridPane servers?
So right now, we're just now re-releasing our remote backup service. So real quick, inside your any site, you can go to downloads and you can get access to all of these all-in-one migration plugins. So you can use these plugins totally independent of our platform. And I strongly recommend having your own third-party, installations of these things. But we're also turning back on server-based remote backups. And that is actually, we've turned on maybe a dozen people this week. It'll probably be generally available in the middle of May. Right now, we're only turning on developer accounts, which all of you just got free coupons to. But right now, that only covers S3, Amazon S3, Backblaze B2, and Wasabi, and then actually S3 compatible. So if you have like Minio or something like that, it should work with those. But in the long run, we will support Dropbox, Google Drive, whatever Microsoft Azure's version is of that. I'm trying to think, there's a couple others. Pretty much every major cloud provider by the end of May, they're going to be built in and supported. And then we're also going to have cool things where you could have multiple remote backup per site. So you could have one site that's automatically pushing to Dropbox and automatically pushing to Backblaze B2, stuff like that.
This is an awesome question from Michael. What would you recommend as an alternative to multi-site? And he says using subdomains ? And he's working with a company that has 35 regional franchises or something. So there's a need to have like multiple sites. What would somebody like that? Oh, I'm sorry. The public would access all of the franchises through a single home domain. Like what? So in that kind of deal, I don't know if you would consider that a WAS or whatever, but what do you recommend for that kind of setup? And I also see this question in terms of languages. Like, I'm going to have like a subsite for French, German, whatever, Hindi. But then I have like kind of my home portal and I'm going to spin up subdomains for all the languages or whatever. Like how could somebody like that think about this with GridPane?
Yeah, so I just personally don't like multi-site. It's all personal bias. Like I think that it's perfect for all kinds of use cases, like a franchise, multi-language, like you said, is a really good use case for it. I strongly recommend subdomain multi-site whenever possible, as opposed to subdirectory. We actually had somebody the other day that asked us if they could do subdomains and subdirectories. They wanted like a multi-site inside of a multi-site, and I'm like, just leave. Never come back. Like you're banned from the platform. But so, I mean, in terms of alternatives, I guess what I would say is the alternative that I would like to see doesn't exist yet. And what that alternative is what's known as multi-tenancy, which is basically you have sort of discrete installations, and you have what's known as database sharding, where you effectively have discrete databases and you have discrete site installations, but you have one set of, say, core files and plugins and themes that those are updated via an automated means, and all of the site installations they sort of only have read access to those things. Okay, and so you get all of the efficiency of I update one thing and it updates all the sites, but you decouple all of this, like the databases just turn into a hot mess in multi-site. Yeah. And so that's my primary complaint with it. And then there's inevitably, I don't want to call anybody that does multi-site lazy. I don't believe that that's the case. I think that, again, when we spoke last, I think we were talking about how like a restaurant WAS right now makes a lot of sense. Like there's all kinds of restaurants that they've never done online ordering. They can still do curbside food pickup, but they don't have a website, or they don't have a website that has the means to take a credit card. I think that's a perfect opportunity for someone to say, in my community, I'm going to build the restaurant curbside pickup WAS, and multi-site makes that possible, faster than anything else out there. But in the long run, we look at problems like this and say, yeah, that's not how we would do it. And so probably you'll see a different way to do it in the not too distant future. But that's if money's no object and you've got the engineering time, I would look at multi-tenancy. But it's just there's nothing that I'm aware of that's turnkey easy for that again yet.
That's awesome. And then I think we have just 2 more questions, and I want to be respectful of your time. And we are recording this, by the way. So if you're watching this and need to go revisit a part, you're going to get an email with the link to that, and also the link that Patrick had on the screen to get the LifterLMS discount. We will announce the LifterLMS winner here for our giveaway at the end. Greg asked, can you migrate a site managed with a service like SpinUp WP that's already hosted and running on DigitalOcean? For example, adding it to GridPane without changing servers.
No. So he wants to keep it. He wants it to stay on the existing server. And
well, it looks like it's like a DigitalOcean server, and he's wanting to switch maybe from SpinUp WP to GridPane or something.
Yeah. So their stack is pretty close to ours, and I like their product quite a bit. I wish they had more aggressive support, but I do very much like the stack that they've built. But the short answer is no. Pretty much what you would want to do, because you own the box, that's one huge benefit of SpinUp WP, just like with us. Because you own the box, we could get on there and copy the site over for you very easily. But probably maybe what you're concerned about is changing the DNS, like having to change the IP address of the site, which unfortunately that's a hassle. One way you could get around that in the future is by using DigitalOcean's, they have what's called floating IPs. So you can have an IP address which is dedicated to a given data center, and you can have it attached to server A, and then you could spin up server B with us, and then inside of DigitalOcean, you could just apply the floating IP to us, and then you wouldn't have to make any DNS change. Unfortunately, you can't do that after the fact. If you go to apply a floating IP, and I have no idea why they do this, it's the dumbest thing. If you go and apply a floating IP, they go, great, here's your floating IP, and it's totally new. They throw out your existing IP address. Like, I think Google is the only one that if you already have a regular IPv4 with them and you say, I want a floating IP, they go, great. They just convert the non-floating to floating, and you maintain the same IP address. But yeah, we can't continue to manage your site for you on SpinUp WP. You just want to build a new server with us. We'll help you clone it over, and then you just decommission that box.
That's awesome. And I think you already answered this, but just to make sure, Matthias, you're good. How does GridPane help with sandbox testing a site? I mean, you provide a staging environment, right?
Yes. So yeah, all sites, we build, I mean, you can see, we build staging sites by default. So we automatically, have our whole list. Like when I built Hosting Demystified, it built staging.hostingdemystified. And
it's just there.
It's there. It's there. If I wanted to delete it, I could, but we turn them on by default. And then, you can go live to staging, and you can select your type. This is something unique that we do that more people should be doing. You can do all files in complete database, partial files, partial database, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you can go both directions with that. And so that's baked in. The other thing that you can do is you can build a site, and you could have that site be whatever.yourdomain.com, and then you can actually change what your primary domain is. So that's another way to basically have a test site and then make it go live. And then still another way that you could do it is you could have testing.whatever.com, and you could clone it to the final domain that you wanted to. So pretty much any which way you want to slice it, you can run your own staging sites. We have people who ask, like, well, I want to have as many staging sites as possible. It's like, well, our system doesn't really care. You can have as many sites as you want, and we make it possible to, the staging push functionality right now is only connected into sites that we built for you that are dedicated as staging. But one cool thing that we're going to be doing in the long run is we're going to allow you to basically say, sort of nest Hosting MBA under Hosting Demystified and say, I want this site to now be the staging site for that site. And then when you went into staging, it would show that connection so that you could do pushes. But if you're not super concerned about like partial pushes, then you can go with either of those routes that I said, either changing the domain or just cloning it to what you want the final sort of destination to be.
Cool, that's awesome. Well, if you wouldn't mind, you had a slide up that had, I think, your email address on or something. Ellen and others were asking how to get a hold of you. So
Yep.
Patrick's email address is on the screen right there.
Yep.
Last question, and then we're gonna do our final stuff and wrap it up. Somebody, Cyan is asking, basically he's on a shared host, economical host. He's got Lifter and WooCommerce running together, and he has 100 concurrent users and the site is crashing on him.
Yes.
What should he do if he were to decide to go with GridPane? Like where could he start?
Yeah, so unfortunately, in that situation, you're gonna need to, you're effectively gonna need to pick a maintenance window where you're sort of shutting them out so that you can get the site stable enough that we can help you migrate it, okay? Because if it's crashing, we can't do a whole lot about it. So you have to, whether you put up, whether you put in like a members only or a maintenance mode plugin to basically shut everybody out, we need enough stability that we can actually just back the site up and move it. And then what I would do, if you've really got 100 concurrent users like all the time, first of all, congratulations, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And second, I would say probably start with at least a $20 box, maybe a $40 box. And then what I would do is we'd clone everything over, test it. You do what's called the local host file redirect trick, where it's basically you tell your local computer to look at the IP address of your new server that you built with us at whatever your URL is, so that you can get into your browser and actually look and see that everything looks right. Then you switch your DNS, so you point your DNS from where it is now to the server that you build with us. Take it out of maintenance mode, let your users start coming back online, and then see where you are in terms of stability and utilization of that box. And if you're seeing that it's still really, really bad, I would recommend two things. Number one, I would try vertically scaling it one time. I would bump up to the next size. And then I would theoretically, we don't publicly make them available yet. We have like site and server audits that we've done in the past for certain customers. We don't have those commercially available yet inside the UI, but there's 2 or 3 other people that we would recommend that I would have somebody take a look at your actual code base, because 100, if you've got a decent enough box, you should be able to handle 100 concurrent users, especially if they're not doing like a quiz. Like if they're just sort of interacting with the content, it should be able to handle it. And so I strongly suspect that if you're still having issues then, that you've got sort of some underlying code issues that you're gonna wanna get some professional eyeballs on. And unfortunately, we just don't have the manpower and the bandwidth to do that yet. But in the long run, that's gonna be something where you can just right inside the UI say, I need to schedule a code audit, and it'll just be scheduled with us. But guys like Mike Andreasen, Dave Hilditch, WP Johnny, those are 3 guys I would name right off the bat that I can confidently say, have them take a look, and they can probably dust off some of the cruft that you might be experiencing. But again, you might be able to just move it into a decent box with us and be off to the races, not have any problem anymore. Because in a shared environment, you're just so limited. There's no headroom whatsoever for that kind of. I'm surprised you even got to that number, to be honest.
One last thing, just because it's super important and we get it all the time, is, and maybe you can do a quick answer, is the caching for dynamic sites. Like LMS is very dynamic.
Yep.
How should people think about caching and caching plugins, and what does the host do? Like people just get in the weeds with caching, and then you need to have a good relationship with the host and the host. I mean, there's like, everybody needs to work together to get the site fast. Like help us out here. Caching.
Yeah. So yeah, we deal with this one all the time. I had one about 2 weeks ago, and the guy was saying my site doesn't look right, and I logged in and everything looked right to me, and then I come to find out that he had our Redis caching running, he had WP Rocket plugin caching running, he was using Beaver Builder, which does its own caching, he had Cloudflare caching on, and then he had browser caching. Yeah. And it took like 10 minutes to just claw through to figure out, like, dude, you got 5 different caches running here. Like, this is ridiculous. Yeah. So sort of the short answer is we've tried to build our platform such that you don't need to run any other plugin at all. And that you don't even need to use Cloudflare's caching, okay? And so sort of the short answer is I would always say start with less. Like either run, WP Rocket is a great plugin, Swift Performance Pro, great plugin. if you like what they're doing, like one cool thing that WP Rocket does is it ties into the Cloudflare cache. Use those together. Don't use our thing, okay? Or use ours and don't use that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Like you wanna eliminate additional layers of caching as much as possible. And another thing that we've tried to do is by making the stack itself just dynamically performant as possible, is that you're serving pages quickly even when they're uncached, okay? And so, so yeah, I mean, we could talk for 3 hours just on caching, because I mean, probably today we got 24 tickets on, well, I'm running this caching and this caching and this caching, you know, and everything looks wrong,
yeah.
you know, and it's like, so again, the short version is pick one, test, and see where you are. Sometimes if you're doing fewer edits, what I normally say is when you're doing editing and when you're adding content and when you're trying new things, turn all your caching, okay? Do it on the staging site so you're not impacting the live site, okay? Turn all your caching off so that you're seeing the real thing. And then gradually start turning things on. But I wouldn't recommend more than 2 caches ever, because you end up getting, you don't know where the hell, what you're even looking at, you know? So you could run our Redis caching, for example. I would recommend Redis more than FastCGI, okay? So FastCGI is really for more static sites. LMS is being highly dynamic. You want to do Redis page caching and object caching. And then potentially you could add in a caching layer with Cloudflare, especially if you wanted to use some of their CDN features. But again, you'll have to sort of find that unique soup of having the proper cache exclusions on your checkout pages, on certain content, you know, logged in content. And this is something that we're iterating constantly. Like we're getting ready to roll out a plugin exclusive to our platform that makes it a lot easier to do cache exclusions, for example. Instead of having to sort of manually tweak these things at Cloudflare, you'll be able to do it right within a plugin, and that will talk to our UI. But yeah, it's not easy. But again, just use one and you'll probably be a lot better off, you know? So just pick ours and stick with it. You should see great performance. If you need to switch to WP Rocket, great, then turn ours off, you know? So that's sort of the hard and fast answer. I wish there was a clearer path on that one, but it is complicated.
Yeah, and you can find out more about that inside the hosting MBA potentially.
Yes, exactly.
Because
I mean, we could do an entire webinar just on caching, just on unique stuff that we've seen that just breaks in really bizarre ways because you've got so many layers of caching going on. So,
and all the client wants is a fast site. They're just like, I just want my site fast. I know I need caching help. Like that's all. That's what they.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and usually the biggest problem that we see is they come to our platform and they think that they still need to run a plugin. And so they're adding in stuff where it's just like, they don't realize, they haven't even tested it. And so it's like, they don't realize it's not moving the needle. It's not having an appreciable difference. And it's actually causing more problems, you know? And so it's like, just test stuff. And we've tried to make it so everything out of the gate, you don't need WordFence as a security plugin. We've got a web application firewall. We've got multiple firewalls in place. You don't need a caching plugin. We've built all of those components. So you're certainly welcome to use them, but we're trying to eliminate the number of tools that you have to deal with, not increase the number of tools you have to deal with.
Amazing. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you got to get going. Patrick
Gallagher, the wife just called me.
He's from GridPane. We had a real treat today. He has a gift for getting into the complex subject of hosting. There's a link on the screen. Can you tell him? And we'll announce our giveaway winner in a second. But can you go over this offer one more time?
Yeah, I'll copy this into the chat.
Okay.
So you should be able to just go straight to this link, and it'll automatically apply a $100 discount. And that discount will apply for 2 months, okay? What I will ask of you is please don't go and sign up for Pro Annual and take a bunch of money off of Pro Annual or whatever. The intent of this coupon is so that you can test the full range of the platform for a total of 10 weeks without giving us any money. Once you're in the platform, you'll see in the bottom right, both on our website and when you're logged in to the actual interface, you've got support. We've got people 24/7. Our average response time is something like 5 minutes. but be a little bit patient for things that are obviously non-essential. Like I would hit them up and say, hey, can I get the coupon for DigitalOcean? So you can use the DigitalOcean link from us, and then you get roughly 2 months free from them. So it's 60 days. You know, I think you'd have to get your credit card out in both situations, but you shouldn't be charged anything. And put us to the test, kick the tires, and let us see if we can earn your business. That's my sales pitch. That's
awesome. Well, I'm going to draw our winner here. We actually just pulled up at random. It's Braden Bernasek is the winner of the year of one of our $99 LifterLMS add-ons. So just shoot us an email to team@lifterlms.com, Braden, and we'll hook you up. Appreciate it. Patrick, thank you for taking us to school today. Thank you for the generous offer you're doing here. And I'm really impressed with just the innovator's mindset, where you're working on this problem of just the tension between hosting and what people are trying to do and trying to remove that friction. I have a ton of respect for that. So Patrick's over at GridPane.com. Thank you, Kathy, for helping me put this on. Appreciate all the thank yous coming through in the chat. We really appreciate it. This is a fantastic learning webinar. We are going to make this available, so you'll get emails if you need to revisit a part of it. And we leave our training webinars up, so you'll be able to access this in the future. Patrick, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us today and your generous offer.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, man. This was cool. This was super cool. Obviously, you all know where to find us. If I can answer any more questions, happy to do so. And look forward to seeing some of you in our various groups and in chats and things like that. And so, everybody take care, stay safe. And that's all I've got.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Patrick. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you around.
Okay. Take care, Chris. Thanks, everybody. See ya.